This is the Cemiterio Prazeres in Campo de Ourique, and Prazeres translates to pleasures. Kind of strange that you would call it the Cemetery of Pleasures, but that's what it's called. If you saw the last video that I did about Campo de Ourique, I was complaining that it's not that easy to get to because there's not a close by metro station, which is true. But upon further review, what I found was that the tram 28 actually comes right into the heart of Campo de Ourique, and the last stop is just outside the gates here. So if you see the tram and on the front of the tram it said Prazeres, that means that's where it's coming to. So tram 28 isn't usually on my radar when it comes to, there's the plane going over again. I mentioned that in the last video, how loud the jets are, because this is right in the flight path. So as you're watching this video, you're probably going to hear planes going overhead. But as far as tram 28 goes, it's usually not on my radar when it comes to public transit, because it's a lot of tourists use it. A lot of Lisboetas use it too to get to work and whatnot, but it gets really crowded, so I often don't think of it. But if you're coming out here to Campo Ourique, it's probably the easiest way. You can also take the 25E bus to get out here. There's a couple other buses. So let's talk a little bit about this cemetery, because it's really an interesting place, because a lot of the wealthiest families are interred here. Some famous folks too. I went through the list of the names. I wasn't really familiar with any of them, but you can tell by the magnificent structures that their remains are housed in. Folks had some money, some big money. The other thing that you find is that there's some very, like the sites behind me, some very modest ones as well. And there's some mausoleums that are very much, unfortunately, in disrepair. The glass to the door has been broken, rusted out. The shelves holding the coffins have collapsed, and the coffin is sliding down towards the door. That might have been what broke the glass. The coffin came down off the shelf, smashed the glass, maybe. I don't know what the cause was. But you see this coffin like sticking up against the door, and in some cases the coffin is slightly open. It's sad, and it's also disturbing, frankly. So keep that in mind. But there are also these magnificent mausoleums too, which are interesting to see just for the artwork, the statuary and whatnot. The other thing about this place that's fascinating is this is the largest collection of cypress trees on the entire Iberian Peninsula. I first walked in here and I felt like, wow, we're in Tuscany, because of all of these cypress trees. But then you see the names on the mausoleums, like Teixeira and Cabral, and you're like, nope, we're definitely in Portugal. You can also see from the view behind me that you have some spectacular views of the April 25th bridge. You can see all the way across the river to the Cristo Rey statue. That's in the city of Almada, and we did a few videos on Almada that you can watch. We went up to the top of the Cristo Rey, and I think the views here are nice. Views there are pretty spectacular. All along Almada there's great views. But anyway, this is our first stop for our second video of Campo de Ourique, and I'd say maybe it's time to get a little bit of food. So we found this restaurant called Granos, and it's just a few steps from the entrance to the cemetery. So I was starving, so we got here and we had lunch. And it's a cute little place inside. They have a couple plates of the day today, including the tomato soup, which we had, which was very nice. They're calling it tomato soup. It had carrots in it too, so that was really good. And then they had what they call a falafel asado. It wasn't really falafel, it was more like a chickpea salad, but that was also nice. And then they have something called alho francês à brás, which is a traditional Portuguese dish, but this is made with fish and leeks, codfish and leeks. But this is a vegetarian restaurant, so they do a vegetarian version of it with leeks and onion and some little fried potatoes on the top. It was really tasty, and of course your plate of the day comes with some rice with chia seeds on the top and a little green salad. And what they did for us was, instead of ordering all this separate, they gave us half of the chickpea salad and half of the vegan fish and a bowl of soup that they split between us. Cop found somebody. So we just got one plate of the day and split it, and frankly, it was plenty for a lunch. So really nice place. The other thing that I'd like to say about this place is that their green salad, the thing I've noticed in Portugal is they're not afraid to add a little salt to the salad. Don't really find that too often in the US, but I think when you've got a green salad, when you've got vegetables, this had tomato and some other veggies in addition to the lettuce, that it's nice. A little salt brings out the flavor, and that's pretty common in Portugal. So that's something as well. All right, nice lunch, ready to carry on our day here in Campo de Ourique in Lisbon. So our next stop is Fiametta. This is an Italian restaurant and grocer here in Campo de Ourique. Been here a few times before, and I've really enjoyed it. This place has a really nice selection of Italian wine. Downstairs there's an Italian grocery store, so they've got Italian products, and in my opinion have one of the top cheese counters here in Lisbon. So we sat down, we didn't want a full dinner, we just wanted a little bit of wine, and then we said, well, maybe we'll get some cheese to go with it. They have one of my favorite cheeses. My friend Orlando used to serve this in his shop when we would go there. Unfortunately, it closed. But this is a truffle cheese. And what's great about this is it's not just little tiny specks of truffle in there. They're like veins of truffle going through this cheese. And it's really surprisingly not that expensive. And they served it with honey. Of course, I drop it in there. They serve it with honey, which might seem like an unusual combination, but know this, they often make truffle-infused honey. So they'll take honey and they'll grate a little bit of truffle in it for a really nice, rich, earthy flavor to add to the sweetness of the honey. So this is kind of that same idea. So good together. That sweetness really brings out the earthiness of the truffle. It's a great combination. So, what do we get for the wines? We got Italian restaurant, Italian grocery. We got Italian wines. This is a Montepulciano. I always struggle with that word. D'Asti. So, this is a blend. Light, but still has some nice tannins to it. That's really nice. Karen will enjoy that. I got the other one that they had by the glass was this Merlot, so I got this. More full-bodied. This is going to go nice with our truffle cheese and honey. Man, that's so good. Love the truffles. So, I've never actually had dinner here before. I've come here and done some shopping, been to their cheese shop, been downstairs, seen their $800 home espresso makers downstairs, but haven't had dinner here yet. Someday we're going to do that at Fiametta, but for now, we'll just enjoy our wine and our cheese and try to ignore the fact that we're in the flight pattern. We're at the Casa de Fernando Pessoa. Pessoa was probably the most famous poet, or one of the top two most famous poets in Portuguese history. He lived he was born in the late 19th century, but he did his work in the early 20th century, died in 1935, very young man. But he lived in Lisbon, grew up in South Africa, but he's Portuguese. And this museum is where he lived for the last 15 years of his life. Now, the reason Pessoa was so important was because him and his colleagues, who he hung out with, other artists and poets, they helped create what's known as the modernist movement, which rejected a lot of the neoclassical stuff that was going on at the time. So, really important guy. And if you travel around Lisbon, you're going to see where Pessoa hung out. It seems like he got everywhere. So if you go to the most famous cafe in all of Portugal, at least in all of Lisbon, A Brasileria, there's a statue of Pessoa right there. In the front case of that cafe, they've got his most famous work, The Message, for sale in several different languages. It's been translated into dozens and dozens of languages. We've also been in other cafes where he hung out. Other cafes where he used to hang out have now been closed. But there's a place called the Arc of Martin, Arco de Martinho Cafe, right by the Praça de Comercio. And he hung out there. There's a tile mural of the image of Pessoa there as well. So you travel around here, you can't miss, if you keep your eyes open, seeing stuff about Pessoa. So I was interested in learning more about him, and it turns out that this house where he lived the last 15 years of his life has been turned into a museum. It's been open to the public for about 30 years now. And, some of these guys, you go to their houses, you go to their museums where they lived, and they're these big mansions. Pessoa wasn't like that. He rented rooms and rented apartments, was not a wealthy guy. But they've done a great job of turning this house where he lived, this apartment, and then expanded on the building to create the museum. And it's got his library of all his books. Even though he wasn't a wealthy guy, he collected a lot of books, many of them in English. He wrote in English. 4 of his books that he wrote, 4 of the 5 books that he wrote, not poems, but the books that he wrote were in English. The Message was written in Portuguese. So very smart guy, very learned guy, tons and tons of books that he took around with him. So that's on one floor. It's also cool because there's a little reading room up there, and they've got everything from his works to children's books that were written about him. So it's a fun little place. Kids like hanging out there. And then one floor is his apartment, his bed. I mean, it's very modest. And a lot of his personal effects. Most famous, his glasses. They remind me of the John Lennon glasses that Lennon made famous, 30 years later. So a lot of his stuff is there. But to me, the most interesting floor and the most interesting part of the museum is the top floor, where they go to explain what are called his heteronyms. And heteronyms are like characters, except in Pessoa's case, a heteronym means that he created this character in incredible detail, created a complete backstory, a birth date, a death date of this character, and he would often write as that heteronym. He would create poems as that heteronym. So it wasn't in his voice, it was in the voice of this character that he created. In fact, in some cases, he wrote as a heteronym to his girlfriend. So he's writing to his own girlfriend in the guise of a different character. And this character would complain about Pessoa to the girlfriend. To me, that's hilarious. And then the girlfriend would write back to him and say, hey, don't criticize Pessoa, he's my boyfriend. So really fascinating guy. And as we live here in Portugal, I think I'm going to do more research about him because some of his early life, especially in South Africa, was pretty interesting too. So this museum is open, I think, 6 days a week from like 10 to 5:30 or something. They often do events. There wasn't a guided tour. I read online they had a guided tour in English, and they don't, but everything's in English and Portuguese, and it's very accessible because they've got an elevator. So if you're limited mobility, you can reach there. And almost all of the exhibits I saw had a Braille function as well. And I think that's just fantastic because when you got a poet, it's language. It doesn't matter what language it's in. It gets translated all these languages. Braille should be a part of that too. So very accessible place. We're in the cafe. It's right next door. Got some water to go with our abatanado, like in a civilized country. And Karen asked for a canela. You get a little cinnamon stick with it, so adds a little bit of flavor. That's nice. So that's Pessoa. Like I said, I'm really interested in learning more about this fascinating and famous guy here in Portugal. So this will be our last stop on our second Campo de Ourique food and wine tour. And it's been a great day here. You know, I mean, we spent a lot of time here last week coming, and then there's so many more places to come and check out. And this is one of them. It's the Red Nose Wine Bar. We went by here the other day, and it was closed. They opened at 4 o'clock, so we were getting in and out early. But today I made a point of staying a little bit later in Campo de Ourique so that we could come here and try it out. And I got to tell you, it was definitely worth it. Now, this place focuses on natural wines, but they also have biodynamic, organic wines and stuff like that. But I should tell you what natural wine means, because a lot of people don't know, although it's become a very hip buzzword in the wine world. Natural wine simply means that you're not using commercial yeast in order to ferment your wine. You're using the naturally occurring yeasts that occur in the atmosphere, in the air, and in the fruit itself. So back in the day, when I used to make wine just for fun as a hobby, we would do this. We would make natural wine. We would not add any commercial yeast to it. And I got to tell you, from my experience and from the winemakers that I've spoken to, making natural wine is so much more difficult than making just regular commercial wine. Commercial wine will definitely give you a product that is consistent. But natural wine, sometimes you will get, frankly, not a great expression of the grapes, not a great wine, but sometimes you will get an amazing wine, just an off-the-charts incredible wine. And that's the difficulty of being a natural winemaker. So let's talk about what we got here. They have so many bottles, and they do have lots of good Portuguese wines, but they've got wines from all over the world. I asked the lady behind the counter, and she said, from everywhere. So let me tell you what I got. I've already finished one glass. That was from Alentejo, I believe. And it was a very nice natural wine. It was soft and round, but it still had some tannins. This one is from the Douro Valley. I said, take me up a step. Let me feel a little bit more fruit, a little bit more tannin, and this is what she gave me, and it was just absolutely spectacular. I love it. We got some olives to go with it, and These olives are brined, of course, in salt, but also with a little bit of citrus, which makes them absolutely fantastic. And look, we've got big, fat green olives, and we've got little black olives, and they're really good. And they go with the wine really nicely. But when I got the second glass, Karen and I both agreed we probably want to have some cheese with this. In fact, I think Karen said it first. She's like, this would be really good with some cheese. So we asked the lady, we said, you know, what can you do for us for some cheese? And she said, I've got the person for you. This guy who makes this cheese is also a natural wine producer, but he makes goat cheese and organic honey as well. And this is what he came up with. So I want to show you, because this is a young goat's milk cheese that has an ash rind to it. Look at how gorgeous that is. This is aged about 60 days, so it's a very young cheese. And man, I had a piece before.
Oh, that would be perfect.
So it's goat cheese, and it's young, so it's not quite as what I call barn floor as maybe an aged cheese is, but still you get some nice flavor with it. Really, really, really good. Top notch. I love it. This cheese is amazing. I could eat that all day. Delicious. Then this one, look how different this is, and I can feel it here. Like, this one is sticky on my fingers, you know, almost, to give you an example of consistency, almost like a brie, like a young goat's cheese that you would get. And I can still, look, you can even see it on my fingers. There's still a little bit on there. This one only aged 2 weeks more, 75 days. And look how it holds its shape, how it's almost to the point of being a hard cheese. Much drier, but still super flavorful. Really good. I am so impressed with these cheeses. So that's the cheese. Karen, she's still on her first glass. This is what she got. Hers is from the Lisbon region. I think it's a natural wine. We tasted a couple before we decided on them. Karen, you like this one? Now that one, ooh, I can feel it coming up through my sinuses a little bit, but still, it's a very soft wine, almost Merlot action going on there. But delicious, absolutely fantastic. Man, I am so impressed with the wines here, and then to have these little snacks to go with it. What a great spot. These guys have only been open for a couple of months, and you better believe we're going to be coming back here. So that's going to be it for this second video now in Campo de Ourique. We visited so many places. We did a bunch in the first video. There were so many more places to visit. Come back for the second video. And even with that, today, there was a bakery, a pasteleria I wanted to go to that won second place in the Pastel de Nata contest last year, 2022. They're on vacation, so I didn't get to go there. There's another place I wanted to go to, a really very typical Portuguese diner restaurant place. They're on vacation too. Didn't get to go there. So I don't know if we're going to do a third. I'm sure we can do a third Campo de Ourique, maybe at a later date. We're not going to do it right away. But man, this Campo de Ourique neighborhood is really great if you want to get what Lisbon is really like, because you have a great combination of the traditional and the new stuff that's going on. I mean, natural wine bars, that's not a traditional Lisbon thing, But these guys are doing a great job here. So, Campo de Ourique, I'm telling you, man, do Chiado, do El Fama, do Baixa, go down by the river and go to Belém and do all those things. But man, get out of the tourist areas and enjoy places like Campo de Ourique and Avelade and places like that are off the tourist path, and really get to know what Lisbon and what Portugal are really like. And I think you'll be rewarded tenfold.